The snow came down hard over Ridgemont that night. It fell in thick sheets, covering the streets, the rooftops, the quiet corners where no one looked. The temperature had dropped below 20 degrees, the kind of cold that hurt to breathe. Behind the gas station on Miller Road, a little girl stood alone in the dark. Her name was Ellie Thornton. She was 7 years old. Her coat was too thin for this weather. Her shoes were soaked through. Her small hands, red and trembling, reached into the dumpster beside the back wall. She moved carefully, quietly, like a child who had learned a long time ago not to make noise. She found something wrapped in paper, a sandwich, half eaten. She pulled it out and held it close to her chest, like it was something precious. The gas station behind her glowed warm and bright. Through the foggy windows, she could see a clerk behind the counter, a coffee machine steaming, a rack of snacks just inside the door. But Ellie did not go inside. She stayed in the shadows. She stayed where no one would see her. 50 feet away, a black SUV sat parked near the air pump. The engine was running. The windows were dark. Inside, a man in a wool coat stared at his phone screen. His name was Gregory Thornton. He was Ellie's father. He had dropped her here 20 minutes ago, told her to wait outside, said he had a call, a deal, something important. He had not looked back once. Ellie's lips were turning blue. Her breath came out in short, shaky clouds. She sat down on the frozen curb and pulled her knees to her chest. She did not cry. She had stopped crying a long time ago. Then came the sound, a low rumble cut through the silence. Deep, heavy, the growl of a motorcycle engine pushing through the frozen air. Ellie looked up as a single headlight appeared at the edge of the parking lot. The bike rolled slowly toward the pumps and stopped. The rider shut off the engine and swung his leg over the seat. He was a big man, broad shoulders, a worn leather vest over a dark hoodie. His face was hard, lined by years of road and weather. A patch on his chest read Iron Wolves MC. His name was Marcus Vance. He was 46 years old. He had been riding since he was 19. Tonight he had been heading home from a long day of work at the shop when the cold pushed him toward the gas station for coffee and warmth. He walked toward the front door. His boots crunched against the icy pavement. His breath fogged in front of him. Then he stopped. Something made him turn his head. He saw her, a small shape sitting behind the building. A child, alone, in the freezing dark. Marcus did not move. He watched her pull the torn sandwich from the paper and take a small bite. He watched her shiver. He watched her tuck her chin against her chest to stay warm. His jaw tightened. His chest felt heavy. He looked toward the SUV, the engine still running, the windows still dark. Someone was in there. He could see the faint glow of a phone screen through the tinted glass. His hands curled into fists inside his gloves. He had seen a lot in his life, done things he was not proud of, lost people he could never get back. But something about this scene hit him in a place he had buried years ago. A memory, a face, a child he could not save. He looked at Ellie again. She had stopped eating. She was looking at him now. Her eyes were wide but empty, not scared, not hopeful, just watching, waiting, like a kid who had learned that no one was coming to help. Marcus felt the cold press into his skin. He knew she felt it worse. He knew what it meant when a child looked like that. He had worn that same look once, a long time ago. He glanced at the gas station door. It was warm inside, safe, easy. He could walk in, grab his coffee, and ride away. No one would blame him. No one would even notice. But her eyes stayed with him. He did not move toward the door. He did not move toward his bike. He stood there in the frozen silence, caught between what was easy and what was right. The SUV's engine hummed. The snow kept falling. And somewhere deep inside Marcus Vance, something that had been quiet for a very long time began to wake up. He took one step toward her, then stopped. He knew what people thought when they saw a man like him near a child. He knew the world would not see a protector. They would see a threat, a criminal, a monster. But that look in her eyes would not let him go. The Thornton house sat at the edge of Ridgemont, where the paved roads turned to gravel, and the nearest neighbor was half a mile away. It was a large modern structure with glass walls and sharp angles, the kind of house that appeared in magazines, the kind of house that looked perfect from the outside. But inside, The silence was heavy. 48 hours before that frozen night at the gas station, Ellie Thornton woke up alone in her room. The heater hummed through the vents. The house was warm. But she pulled her blanket tighter anyway. She climbed out of bed and walked down the long hallway toward the kitchen. Her footsteps echoed on the polished concrete floors. No one called her name. No one asked if she slept well. The house was empty, except for her. She found a box of cereal in the pantry and poured some into a bowl. There was no milk in the fridge. She ate it dry, sitting at the edge of a marble counter that was too tall for her. Her legs dangled above the floor. She chewed slowly and stared at the wall. Her father's office door was closed. It was always closed. Ellie's mother had left 2 years ago. Her name was Diane. She had soft hands and a warm voice, and she used to sing to Ellie before bed. But then something changed. Diane started crying a lot. She stopped getting out of bed. She forgot to pick Ellie up from school. One day, she forgot to turn off the stove, and the kitchen filled with smoke. After that, the lawyers came. Gregory stood in front of a judge and spoke calmly about stability and safety and what was best for the child. He had a clean record. He had money. He had a house with heated floors and a room full of toys Ellie never asked for. Diane did not have any of those things. The judge gave custody to Gregory. Ellie did not understand what that meant until her mother stopped coming to see her. The visits got shorter. Then they stopped completely. Now Ellie could barely remember what her mother's voice sounded like. Gregory hired housekeepers to take care of her. Nannies came and went. Some of them were kind. One of them used to braid Ellie's hair and tell her stories about faraway places, but none of them stayed long. Gregory's temper made sure of that. He never yelled at Ellie. He saved that for the people he paid. One by one, they all quit. Now there was no one left, just Ellie and the silence. She finished her cereal and placed the bowl in the sink. She walked to the front window and looked out at the empty driveway. The bus would come in 20 minutes. She grabbed her backpack and stepped outside alone. At school, Ellie sat in the back of the classroom. She did not raise her hand. She did not talk to the other kids. Her teacher, Mrs. Hartley, noticed that Ellie wore the same gray sweater 3 days in a row. She noticed that Ellie never brought lunch money. She noticed the dark circles under the girl's eyes. But she did not report anything. The Thornton name was on a plaque in the school gymnasium. Gregory had donated enough money to build the new library. No one wanted to ask questions about a man like that, so no one did. That evening, Gregory came home late. His phone was pressed to his ear. His voice was sharp. He walked past Ellie without looking at her. She sat on the couch with a book in her lap, pretending to read. He disappeared into his office and closed the door. She waited. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, the door opened. Gregory stepped out and looked at her like he had forgotten she was there. His jaw was tight. His eyes were somewhere else. He said, "Get your coat. We are going out. I have a meeting." Ellie did not ask where. She did not ask why. She had learned a long time ago that asking questions only made things worse. She grabbed her thin coat from the closet and followed him to the car. The black SUV pulled out of the driveway and disappeared into the falling snow. Ellie sat in the back seat, her hands folded in her lap. She held a small stuffed rabbit close to her chest. It was old and worn, the only thing she had left from her mother. Gregory did not speak. He did not turn on the radio. He did not glance at her. In the mirror, the road stretched ahead, dark and quiet. The snow fell heavier now, covering the windshield in a soft white blur. Ellie watched the wipers push it away, again and again. She pressed her face to the cold glass and looked out at the empty night. She did not know where they were going. She did not know that in less than 2 hours, she would be standing alone behind a gas station in the freezing dark. All she knew was the silence. And the silence never told her anything. Gregory's phone rang the moment he shut off the engine. He answered before the second ring and stepped out of the SUV without a word. His voice was loud, sharp. He paced across the parking lot, one hand pressed against his ear, the other waving in the air as he shouted at whoever was on the other end. Ellie sat in the back seat and watched him through the window. Snowflakes landed on the glass and melted slowly, leaving tiny rivers that ran down to the bottom of the frame. She traced one with her finger and followed it until it disappeared. The heater clicked off. The engine had been running when they arrived, but Gregory had turned it off before stepping out. The warmth drained from the car quickly. Ellie pulled her knees up onto the seat and wrapped her arms around them. 10 minutes passed. Gregory walked further from the SUV. His voice faded into the wind. He turned the corner of the building, and disappeared from view. 15 minutes. Ellie's stomach growled. She pressed her hand against it and tried to make the feeling go away. She had not eaten since lunch, and lunch had been a granola bar she found in the bottom of her backpack. It was stale. She ate it anyway. She looked out at the gas station. The lights glowed warm and yellow through the frost. A man inside was pouring coffee into a paper cup. A woman paid for gas and walked back to her car. No one looked at the black SUV parked in the shadows. Ellie's breath fogged in front of her face. Her fingers were getting numb. She tucked them under her arms and waited. She did not call for her father. She did not honk the horn. She had learned a long time ago that making noise only made things worse. Her eyes moved to the dumpster behind the building. She had done this before. 2 months ago, Gregory forgot to pick her up from school. She walked to a gas station near the bus stop and found a half-eaten bag of chips in the trash. 1 month ago, he locked himself in his office for an entire weekend. She ate crackers from the pantry until they ran out. Then she found an old box of cereal. Then nothing. She knew how to survive. Ellie opened the car door slowly. The cold rushed in and wrapped around her body. She stepped out onto the icy pavement and closed the door behind her without making a sound. Her sneakers sank into the snow as she walked toward the back of the building. Her coat was thin. It was not made for this kind of weather. Gregory had bought it for a photo he posted online a few weeks ago. The caption said something about spending quality time with his daughter. He never wore the coat again after the picture was taken. Neither did she. It looked nice in the photo, but it did not keep her warm. She reached the dumpster and climbed up on a crate beside it. Her fingers gripped the frozen metal edge. She pulled herself up and looked inside. Bags of trash, cardboard boxes, broken bottles. And then she saw it. A sandwich wrapped in paper, still half inside a plastic bag. She grabbed it and pulled it out. The bread was cold and a little stale, but the cheese was still soft. She climbed back down and sat on the curb. She did not unwrap it right away. She held it against her chest and looked around to make sure no one was watching. Her lips were turning blue. Her hands shook, but she did not cry. She had stopped crying a long time ago. She peeled back the paper and took a small bite. The bread was dry, the cheese tasted like nothing. But it was food, and food was all that mattered. Then she heard it. A low rumble broke through the silence, deep and steady, growing louder with every second. Ellie looked up. A single headlight cut through the falling snow. A motorcycle rolled into the parking lot and stopped near the pumps. The engine growled once more, then went quiet. A man climbed off the bike. He was tall and broad. His leather vest was worn and faded. His face was hard. He walked toward the gas station, his boots crunching against the frozen ground, and then he stopped. He turned his head slowly. He saw her. Ellie did not move. She did not run. She knew strangers could be dangerous. Her father told her that once, a long time ago, before he stopped telling her anything at all. But something in her small body kept her still. The man stood frozen in place. His eyes did not look through her. They looked at her. He saw the thin coat, the wet shoes, the sandwich in her trembling hands. And for the first time in a very long time, someone looked at Ellie Thornton like she mattered. Marcus stood motionless in the frozen parking lot. His boots were planted on the icy ground, but his mind was somewhere else, somewhere 8 years in the past. He saw a face, a small face with brown eyes and a gap-toothed smile. A girl who used to run toward him every time he came home from a ride. A girl who would wrap her arms around his leg and refuse to let go until he picked her up. Her name was Lily. She was 6 years old when she died. Marcus blinked, and the memory faded. The snow kept falling. The girl behind the dumpster kept staring at him. She was not Lily. He knew that. But the way she held that sandwich, the way her small body shivered in the cold, the way her eyes looked right through him without expecting anything. It was the same. 8 years ago, Marcus had been 2 states away when he got the call. He was riding with his club through the mountains of Montana. The night was cold, just like this one. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He almost did not answer, but he did. His wife's voice was broken. She could barely speak. She said Lily's name. She said hospital. She said drunk driver. She said gone. Marcus dropped the phone. He got on his bike and rode through the night without stopping. 600 miles. No sleep, no food, just the road and the wind and the terrible silence in his chest. By the time he reached the hospital, it was over. Lily was gone. He never got to say goodbye. He never forgave himself. The months that followed were dark. Marcus stopped eating. He stopped talking. He drank until he could not remember her face, and then he drank more because forgetting felt worse than remembering. His wife tried to reach him, but he had already locked himself away. The divorce papers came 6 months later. He signed them without reading a single word. The only thing that kept him alive was the club. The Iron Wolves did not ask questions. They did not try to fix him. They just rode beside him, mile after mile, through every state and every storm. They gave him a reason to keep moving, a reason to wake up in the morning, but they could not give him peace. He still carried Lily's drawing in his wallet. A stick-figure family with a big sun in the corner. She had made it the week before the accident. She handed it to him and said, "This is us forever, Daddy." He never took it out. He never showed it to anyone. But it was always there, folded and worn, pressed against his chest. Now he stood in a gas station parking lot in Ridgemont, Colorado, staring at a little girl who had no idea what she meant to him. She was not Lily. He knew that. But she was someone's daughter. And she was alone. And she was cold. And no one was coming to help her. Marcus looked at the SUV parked near the air pump. The engine was still running. The windows were dark. Whoever was inside had not moved in minutes. They had not stepped out. They had not checked on the girl. His jaw tightened. He knew what people saw when they looked at him. Leather vest, faded tattoos, a beard that had not been trimmed in weeks, a Harley parked at the curb. They saw a man who looked like trouble, a man who should not be anywhere near a child. They did not see the drawing in his wallet. They did not see the father he used to be. He could walk away. He could go inside, buy his coffee, and ride home. Let someone else notice. Let the system handle it. That was the smart thing to do. But that hollow look in her eyes. He had seen that look before. In the mirror every single day for the past 8 years. No one else would notice. No one else ever did. Marcus exhaled slowly. His breath hung in the frozen air. He glanced at the gas station door, warm light spilling out onto the pavement. Then he looked back at the girl. She had not moved. She still sat on the curb, the sandwich clutched in her trembling hands. Her lips were blue. Her eyes were fixed on him, not scared, not hopeful, just watching, waiting. Marcus took one step toward her, then another. He did not know what he was going to say. He did not have a plan. He only knew one thing. He could not leave her in the snow. Marcus walked toward her, slowly. His boots pressed into the snow with each step. He kept his hands open and visible at his sides. He stopped a few feet away and crouched down to her level. Ellie did not run. She did not scream. She pulled the sandwich behind her back and watched him with wide, careful eyes. Her body was still. Her breath came out in short, shaky clouds. Marcus kept his voice low and steady. He said, "Hey there, you okay?" Ellie did not answer right away. She looked at his face. She looked at his leather vest. She looked at his hands. Then she gave a small nod. Marcus stayed where he was. He did not move closer. He asked, "Where are your parents?" Ellie glanced toward the SUV parked near the air pump. She said, "Over there." Marcus followed her gaze. The engine was still running. The windows were dark. He could not see anyone inside. His jaw tightened. He looked back at Ellie. He asked, "Are you cold?" She nodded again. Her lips were pale. Her fingers were red and raw. She gripped the sandwich tighter behind her back, like she was afraid he might try to take it from her. Marcus exhaled slowly. He said, "I am not going to hurt you. I promise." Ellie did not respond. She just watched him. Her eyes were not filled with fear. They were filled with something else, something older, something that looked like exhaustion. Inside the gas station, a woman stood behind the counter. Her name tag said Linda. She was in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a ponytail. She had been watching through the window since the biker pulled in. Now she saw him crouched near a child in the shadows behind the building. Her hand moved toward the phone on the counter. She hesitated. She was not sure what she was seeing. A threat, a rescue, something in between. She waited. Marcus knew she was watching. He could feel her eyes on his back. He knew exactly how this looked. A man like him, a child like her, alone in the dark. But he did not move. He looked at Ellie and said, "You should not be out here by yourself. It is too cold." Ellie said nothing. She just stared at him. Marcus asked, "Are you hungry?" She hesitated. Then she nodded. He stood up slowly. He kept his movements calm and deliberate. He said, "Stay right here. I will be back in 1 minute. He walked toward the gas station. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss. The warm air hit his face like a wave. Linda watched him from behind the register, her hand still resting near the phone. Marcus walked to the drink station. He filled a paper cup with hot chocolate and snapped a lid on top. He grabbed a wrapped sandwich from the cold case. Then he walked to the small rack near the register and picked up a pair of cheap knit gloves. They were purple with white snowflakes, the only ones that looked small enough to fit a child's hands. He placed everything on the counter. Linda looked at him. She looked at the items. She looked back at his face. Marcus said, "Just these." She rang them up without a word. He paid in cash and picked up the bag. Before he turned to leave, he said, "There is a little girl out back. She is freezing. I do not know who she is, but someone needs to check on her." Linda blinked. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Marcus did not wait for a response. He walked back outside. Ellie was still there. She had not moved an inch. She sat on the frozen curb, her arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes fixed on the door. She was waiting, like she had been waiting her whole life. Marcus crouched down again. He held out the hot chocolate. He said, "This is for you. Be careful. It is hot." Ellie reached out slowly. Her fingers trembled as they wrapped around the warm cup. She pulled it close to her chest and looked at him. He held out the gloves. He said, "These two. Put them on before your fingers fall off." She took them. She pulled them on one at a time, her eyes never leaving his face. Then headlights swept across the parking lot. A black SUV rolled around the corner of the building. The brakes squeaked as it came to a stop. The driver's door opened. Gregory Thornton stepped out. His phone was still pressed to his ear. His wool coat was buttoned to the collar. His eyes moved across the scene and locked onto his daughter standing in the snow with a stranger in leather and chains. His expression shifted from confusion to something colder. He ended the call without saying goodbye. Gregory Thornton moved fast across the parking lot. His leather shoes slipped on the icy pavement, but he did not slow down. His jaw was tight. His eyes were locked on his daughter. He did not ask if she was okay. He reached Ellie in seconds and grabbed her arm. His fingers wrapped around her thin wrist and pulled her toward the SUV. She stumbled, the hot chocolate slipping from her hand and spilling across the frozen ground. Marcus did not move. He stood where he was and watched. Gregory stopped. He turned and looked at the biker for the first time. His eyes moved over the leather vest, the faded patches, the worn boots. His lip curled. He said, "Who are you? What are you doing with my daughter?" Marcus kept his voice low and steady. He said, "I found her digging through the dumpster. She has been out here in the snow for almost 30 minutes. Gregory blinked. His grip on Ellie's arm loosened for just a second. Then it tightened again. He said, "That is none of your business." Marcus did not look away. He said, "She was freezing. Her lips were blue. She was eating garbage." Gregory's face shifted. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not guilt, not shame. Something closer to calculation. He was thinking, measuring, deciding how to handle this. He forced a thin smile and said, "She wanders off sometimes. Kids do that. You would not understand." Marcus said, "I understand plenty." Gregory's smile disappeared. He took a step closer and lowered his voice. He said, "I do not know who you think you are, but I suggest you get on your bike and ride away. Now, before I call the police and tell them a biker was harassing my child." Marcus did not flinch. He said, "Go ahead. Call them." The two men stood in silence. The snow fell between them. Ellie watched from behind her father's leg, her small body trembling. Then the gas station. Door opened. Linda stepped outside. Her arms were crossed over her chest. Her eyes moved from Marcus to Gregory to the little girl. She did not speak. She just watched. A truck driver at the far pump looked up from the nozzle. He saw the scene unfolding. He did not move, but his presence added weight to the moment. Gregory noticed. His shoulders shifted. He realized he was being watched. His voice changed. The edge softened. The smile returned, but this time it did not reach his eyes. He said, "Look, this is all a misunderstanding. Ellie knows she is not supposed to leave the car. She gets restless. I was on an important call. I did not realize she had gotten out." Marcus said nothing. Gregory looked at Linda and added, "Kids, right? They never listen." Linda did not smile. She looked at Ellie. The girl's face was pale. Her eyes were fixed on the ground. She had not said a word since her father arrived. Gregory pulled Ellie closer and said, "Come on, sweetheart. Let us get you back in the car. You must be freezing." His voice was warm now, gentle, but Ellie did not relax. She did not look up. She moved with him like a shadow, silent and small. Marcus watched them walk toward the SUV. He watched Gregory open the back door and guide Ellie inside. He watched the man pause, glance back at the clerk and the truck driver, and force another smile. Gregory called out, "Thank you for your concern. Really. But we are fine." He climbed into the driver's seat and closed the door. The engine revved. The headlights flared. The black SUV pulled out of the parking lot and disappeared into the falling snow. Marcus did not move. Linda stepped closer. She stood beside him and watched the tail lights fade into the darkness. The cold pressed against them both. She said quietly, "That little girl did not look lost." Marcus exhaled. His breath hung in the air. Linda continued. She looked forgotten. Marcus turned his head and looked at her. Her face was lined with concern. She had seen something tonight, something that did not sit right. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He opened the camera and looked at the last image on the screen. A photo he had taken when Gregory was not looking. The license plate of the black SUV. Linda saw it. She nodded slowly. Marcus said, "You got a number for child services around here?" Linda said, "I do, and I have been working at this station for 12 years. I have seen a lot of things, but I have never seen a child look at her own father the way that girl looked at him." Marcus slipped the phone back into his pocket. He was not done with Gregory Thornton. Marcus pushed through the heavy wooden door of the Iron Wolves clubhouse just before midnight. The room was warm and loud. A few members sat around a pool table in the corner. Others leaned against the bar, nursing beers and talking low. The noise faded as Marcus walked in. His face was hard. His jaw was set. The men who knew him best could tell something was wrong. Dutch looked up from his seat near the fireplace. He was the oldest member of the club, a Vietnam veteran with gray hair and steady hands. He watched Marcus cross the room and said nothing. Marcus stopped in the center of the floor. He did not sit down. He said, "I need to talk. All of you." The room went quiet. One by one, the members gathered. They pulled chairs into a loose circle. They set down their drinks. They waited. Marcus told them everything. He described the gas station, the snow, the little girl digging through the dumpster in a coat too thin for the cold. He described her blue lips and trembling hands. He described the black SUV parked nearby with the engine running and no one inside. He described the father, the expensive coat, the phone pressed to his ear, the way he grabbed his daughter's arm without asking if she was okay, the way he smiled at the clerk and the truck driver like the whole thing was a joke. He said, "That man left his kid in the freezing cold for half an hour. She was eating trash. She did not cry. She did not ask for help. She just sat there like she had given up." The room was silent. A younger member named Cole leaned forward. He had a daughter the same age. His voice was tight when he asked, "Did you call the cops?" Marcus shook his head. He said, "I got the plate. I asked the clerk about child services. But you know how this works. Rich guy in a nice car, clean record, big house. They will send someone out. He will smile and talk his way through it. And then nothing happens." Dutch exhaled slowly. He rubbed his jaw and said, "You know the risks. We start following this man. We are the ones who look dangerous. We touch that kid, we go to prison. The world does not see us the way we see ourselves." Marcus nodded. He said, "I know." Then a voice came from the back of the room. It was Rosa. She walked forward and stood beside Marcus. Rosa had been with the Iron Wolves for almost 15 years. She organized the club's charity rides, the toy drives, the hospital visits. She had 3 kids of her own and a grandson on the way. She said, "Dutch is right. The system is not built to catch men like this. Quiet neglect does not leave bruises. Rich men do not get investigated. If we do nothing, that little girl disappears into that house and no one ever sees her again." The room shifted. A few members nodded. Others looked at the floor. Rosa continued, "I'm not saying we break the law. I am saying we do what we have always done. We watch. We gather proof. We make sure someone sees what is really happening in that home. Dutch looked at her. He said, "And if we are wrong?" Rosa said, "Then we walk away. But if we are right, and we did nothing, that is on us." The room fell silent again. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He turned it around and showed them the photo on the screen, the license plate of the black SUV. He said, "I'm not asking anyone to risk themselves. I am asking if we are the kind of men who look away." Dutch stared at the phone. He did not speak for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the center of the room. He said, "We vote." One by one, the members raised their hands. Some were fast, some hesitated. A few kept their arms down. But when the count was finished, the decision was clear. They would watch. They would gather proof. They would find a way to protect this child without becoming the monsters the world already believed them to be. Marcus nodded once. He looked at the photo on his phone. Tomorrow, he would find out where Gregory Thornton lived. He would learn the layout of the house, the schedule of the father, the patterns of the girl. He did not know what he would find behind those glass walls, but he knew one thing for certain. Ellie Thornton was not going to disappear. Marcus parked his truck at the end of a gravel road, half a mile from the Thornton property. The engine clicked as it cooled. He raised a pair of binoculars and focused on the large glass house at the edge of the trees. 3 days had passed since the gas station. He was not alone tonight. Cole sat in the passenger seat, a notebook in his lap. Dutch followed in a separate vehicle parked further down the road. They had rotated shifts since the vote at the clubhouse. Different cars, different times, never too close, never too long. They watched. The house looked empty most of the time. Lights turned on and off at odd intervals, controlled by timers or sensors. No movement in the windows, no sound from inside. The driveway sat empty for hours until a black SUV or a rideshare pulled in. Marcus had not seen Ellie outside once. No playing in the snow, no waiting for the school bus, no running through the yard like other kids her age. She arrived home each afternoon in the back of a stranger's car. She walked inside. The door closed behind her. And that was it. Cole flipped a page in his notebook and said, "School pickup today was a gray sedan. Different driver than yesterday. Third service this week." Marcus nodded, and he kept the binoculars steady. Cole continued, "No sign of the father until almost 8 last night. Stayed inside for maybe an hour, then left again." Marcus lowered the binoculars. He asked, "And the girl?" Cole said, "Lights in her room went on around 9. Off by 10. No movement after that." Marcus exhaled slowly. He looked at the house through the windshield. The structure was modern and expensive. Sharp angles, tall windows, the kind of place that looked perfect from the outside. But inside, a 7-year-old was living like a ghost. The next afternoon, Marcus followed Gregory. He kept 3 cars back on the main road. He watched the black SUV pull into the parking lot of a restaurant downtown. Gregory stepped out in a tailored coat and walked inside without checking his phone once. Marcus parked across the street and waited. Through the window, he saw Gregory sit at a table near the front. A woman joined him a few minutes later. She was younger than him, dressed in heels and a red jacket. She laughed at something he said. He poured her wine. They leaned close and talked like the rest of the world did not exist. Marcus watched for almost an hour. Gregory never looked at his watch. He never checked the time. He never glanced toward the door like a man who had somewhere to be. He looked relaxed, charming, successful. He looked like the kind of man who gave speeches at business luncheons and donated money to schools. But somewhere across town, his daughter was sitting alone in an empty house. That night, Marcus met Rosa at the clubhouse. She brought a woman with her, a child welfare advocate named Dina, who worked with at-risk families in the county. Rosa had known her for years through the club's charity rides. Dina looked at the notes. She studied the photos. She listened to Marcus describe what he had seen. When he finished, she set the papers down and said, "This is textbook neglect. Emotional abandonment. No supervision, no consistent caregiving. It is real. It is serious. But it is also hard to prove in court without direct testimony or physical evidence." Marcus asked, "What kind of evidence?" Dina said, "Medical records, teacher statements, something that shows the child is in danger. Right now, all you have is observation. A good lawyer would call it speculation." Rosa leaned forward. She said, "So what do we do?" Dina looked at her, and said, "Keep watching. Document everything, and hope the father makes a mistake." The next night, Marcus sat in his truck again, at the end of the gravel road. The house was dark, no lights in the windows, no cars in the driveway. He raised the binoculars and scanned the property. Then he saw her. Ellie was sitting in the window of her room, on the second floor. The glass reflected the snow outside, but he could see her shape clearly. She was small and still. Her arms were wrapped around something, a stuffed rabbit with a missing ear. She was looking out at the night, not moving, not crying, just waiting. Marcus lowered the binoculars. His chest felt tight. He knew that look. He had worn it himself as a child, the look of someone waiting for a person who is never going to come. The clock on his dashboard read 11:15. The driveway stayed empty. The house stayed dark. Gregory Thornton did not come home that night, and once again, Ellie was alone. The temperature dropped to 8 degrees that night. A winter storm warning had been issued 3 hours earlier. Ice coated the roads. Power lines sagged under the weight of frozen rain. Schools across the county had already canceled classes for the next day. But the Thornton house sat dark at the end of the gravel road. No lights in the windows, no smoke from the chimney, no car in the driveway. Gregory Thornton was 200 miles away, closing a deal in Denver. He had left Ellie with a housekeeper named Maria. But Maria had quit 2 days earlier after Gregory screamed at her over a misplaced phone charger. She had packed her things and walked out without saying goodbye. Gregory did not know this, or he did not care. Ellie woke up sometime after midnight. The air in her room was cold. Her breath came out in a thin white cloud. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and called out for her father. No one answered. She climbed out of bed and walked into the hallway. The floor was freezing under her bare feet. The house was silent, except for the wind pressing against the windows. She walked down the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing, the other clutching her stuffed rabbit. The living room was empty. The kitchen was dark. She tried the light switch. Nothing happened. She walked to the thermostat on the wall near the front door. She stared at the buttons and the small glowing screen. The numbers did not make sense to her. She pressed one, then another. The screen blinked, but nothing changed. She was 7 years old. She did not know how to fix the heat. She did not know why the lights were off. She only knew that she was alone, and the cold was getting worse. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and sat down on the couch. She pulled her knees to her chest and held the rabbit close to her face. She did not cry. She had stopped crying a long time ago. Down the road, Marcus sat in his truck with Rosa beside him. They had been watching the house for almost 2 hours. The storm had turned the windshield into a sheet of ice. The wipers scraped across the glass every few seconds. Rosa leaned forward and squinted through the blur. She said, "All the lights just went out." Marcus looked at the house. The windows were black. Not even the porch light was on. He said, "Power outage?" Rosa shook her head. She said, "The neighbors still have lights." "Look." Marcus followed her gaze. She was right. The houses further down the road were glowing. Only the Thornton property was dark. They waited. 1 hour passed, then another. The storm grew worse. The wind howled through the trees. Ice cracked against the roof of the truck. Then Rosa grabbed his arm. She pointed at the window on the second floor. A small face appeared behind the glass. Ellie pressed her hand against the window, her palm flat against the frost. She stayed there for a moment, staring out at the snow. Then she disappeared. Rosa pulled out her phone. She dialed the non-emergency line and explained the situation. A child alone in a house without heat during a dangerous storm. The dispatcher said they would send someone, but the roads were bad. It could take an hour, maybe more. Marcus opened the door of the truck. Rosa said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm not waiting an hour." She reached for his arm. She said, "Marcus, if you go in there without permission, you could be arrested. You know that." He looked at her. His voice was calm. He said, "That little girl is freezing. I'm not going to sit here and watch her die." He stepped out of the truck. The cold hit him like a wall. He zipped his jacket and started walking toward the house. Rosa called after him, but he did not stop. The driveway was slick with ice. He moved carefully, his boots crunching against the frozen ground. The house loomed ahead of him, dark and silent. No movement inside, no sign of life. He reached the front door and stopped. He raised his fist and knocked 3 times. The sound echoed through the empty night. He waited. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. He knocked again, harder this time. Then he heard it. A small voice on the other side of the door, quiet, shaking, afraid. Is someone there? Marcus crouched beside the door and pressed his hand flat against the frozen wood. He kept his voice low and steady. He said, "Hey, I know you. We met before. At the gas station, do you remember?" Silence on the other side. He waited. The wind cut through his jacket. Ice clung to his beard. Then the small voice came again, softer now. She said, "The hot chocolate man." Marcus exhaled. He said, "That is right. And the gloves, the purple ones with the snowflakes. Do you still have them?" A pause. Then she said, "Yes." He leaned closer to the door. He said, "My name is Marcus. I am not going to hurt you. I just want to make sure you are okay. Can you unlock the door?" She did not answer right away. When she spoke, her voice trembled. She said, "I'm not allowed." Marcus closed his eyes for a second. He said, "I understand. Is there anyone else in the house with you?" She said, "No." He asked, "Are you cold?" She said, "Yes." He asked, "Are you scared?" She did not answer. Footsteps crunched through the ice behind him. Rosa appeared at his side, her breath fogging in the frozen air. She knelt beside him and leaned toward the door. She spoke gently. She said, "Hi, sweetheart. My name is Rosa. I am a friend of Marcus. We are not going to hurt you. We just want to make sure you are warm and safe until help gets here. Okay?" Ellie's voice was barely a whisper. She said, "Okay." Rosa looked at Marcus. She pointed toward the side window near the porch. She said, "Can you see us through the window? Can you look and make sure it is just us?" A few seconds passed. Then a small face appeared behind the frosted glass. Ellie's eyes moved from Rosa to Marcus and back again. Her cheeks were pale. Her lips were dry. Rosa waved gently. She said, "See? Just us. No one else." Ellie stared at them for a long moment. Then she disappeared from the window. Marcus heard the click of a lock. The door opened slowly. Ellie stood in the gap, wrapped in a thin blanket that barely reached her knees. Her feet were bare on the cold tile. Her stuffed rabbit dangled from one hand. Rosa stepped inside first. She crouched down to Ellie's level and said, "You are so brave. Let me get you something warmer." She hurried back to the truck and returned with a heavy coat from the back seat. She wrapped it around Ellie's shoulders and zipped it up to her chin. The coat was too big, but it was warm. Marcus stepped into the house and looked around. The air inside was almost as cold as the air outside. His breath still fogged in front of him. The lights were off. The vents were silent. He walked to the thermostat on the wall. The screen was dark. He pressed a button. Nothing happened. He followed the hallway to a door near the kitchen. He opened it and found the breaker panel. He ran his fingers down the row of switches. One of them was flipped to the off position, the one labeled HVAC. He stared at it for a moment. Either someone turned it off by accident or someone did it on purpose. He flipped it back on. The vents hummed to life. He walked back to the living room. Rosa sat on the couch with Ellie beside her. The girl was still shivering, but her eyes were calmer now. She held the rabbit against her chest and watched Marcus cross the room. He said, "Heat is coming back on. She should warm up soon." Rosa nodded. She looked at Ellie and said, "The police are on their way. They are going to make sure you are safe." Ellie did not respond. She just stared at the floor. 10 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed through the windows. A police cruiser pulled into the driveway, followed by a second vehicle. 2 officers stepped out and walked toward the house. Marcus met them at the door. He explained everything. The surveillance, the cold house, the child alone. He showed them the notes and the photos Rosa had brought from the truck. The officer looked at Ellie. He looked at the dark house. He looked at the coat wrapped around her small frame. He made a call. 20 minutes later, an ambulance arrived. A paramedic crouched beside Ellie and checked her temperature. He wrapped a thermal blanket around her shoulders and spoke softly while he worked. A woman from Child Protective Services pulled up behind the ambulance. She introduced herself and knelt beside Ellie with a calm, steady voice. Marcus stepped back. He stood near the door and watched as the system finally began to move. Then he felt something. A small hand reached out and grabbed his. Ellie did not look up. She did not speak. She just held on. And Marcus did not let go. Gregory Thornton pulled into his driveway just after 9 the next morning. His flight from Denver had landed 2 hours earlier. His phone had 17 missed calls from a number he did not recognize. He stepped out of the SUV and stopped. 2 police cruisers sat parked near the front door. An unmarked sedan was positioned beside them. Yellow tape stretched across the porch. An officer stood near the entrance with a clipboard in hand. Gregory walked forward, slowly. His face shifted from confusion to irritation. He said, "What is going on here? This is my property." The officer looked up. He said, "Are you Gregory Thornton?" Gregory said, "Yes. What is this about?" The officer stepped closer. He said, "Sir, your daughter was found alone in this house last night during a winter storm. The heat had been turned off at the breaker. She was hypothermic when emergency responders arrived." Gregory's expression flickered. He said, "That is impossible. I left her with the housekeeper." The officer said, "The housekeeper quit 3 days ago. There was no one in the home." Gregory's jaw tightened. His voice rose. He said, "This is a misunderstanding. I want to speak to whoever is in charge." A woman in a gray coat stepped out of the unmarked sedan. She introduced herself as Detective Marquez. She asked Gregory to come with her to the station to answer some questions. He refused at first. He threatened lawsuits. He demanded to know who had called the police. He said he knew people. He said this would not stand, but the detective did not flinch. She said the questions could happen at the station or at the courthouse. His choice. Gregory went to the station. 3 hours later, Child Protective Services completed their interview with Ellie. She sat in a small room with soft chairs and a box of crayons. A woman named Sandra sat across from her and spoke gently. Ellie answered slowly. She looked at the floor most of the time, but when she spoke, her words were clear. She talked about being left alone, about nights when her father did not come home, about mornings when there was no food in the kitchen, about learning to find things in trash cans because no one remembered to feed her. She talked about the gas station, about the man in the leather vest who gave her hot chocolate, about the purple gloves that still sat on her nightstand. She talked about the housekeeper who left, about the silence in the big empty house, about pressing her hand to the cold window and wondering if anyone would ever come. Sandra wrote everything down. Investigators searched the Thornton home. They found no recent grocery receipts, no medical records showing regular checkups, no working phone number listed on Ellie's school emergency contact form. They found a closet full of expensive clothes that had never been worn, a playroom full of toys still in their packaging, a refrigerator stocked with wine and protein shakes, but nothing a child could eat. Gregory Thornton's perfect image began to crack. He was arrested that afternoon on charges of child neglect and endangerment. His bail was set at $75,000. His business partners stopped returning calls. His name appeared on the evening news beside footage of the large glass house. But the story was not about Gregory. It was about Ellie. The family court moved quickly. A judge reviewed the case and granted temporary custody to Ellie's maternal grandmother. Her name was Helen Weaver. She lived in a small town in Oregon and had been trying to see Ellie for years. Every letter she sent had gone unanswered. Every phone call had been blocked. She flew into Colorado the same day the judge made the ruling. Helen was 62 years old. She had silver hair and soft hands and eyes that looked just like her daughter Diane's. She walked into the courthouse lobby and stopped when she saw Ellie standing near the window. The little girl turned around. Helen crouched down and opened her arms. Ellie ran to her. She buried her face in her grandmother's shoulder and held on tight. Helen wrapped her arms around the girl and did not let go. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she did not make a sound. Marcus stood at the back of the lobby. He wore a clean jacket over his Iron Wolves vest. Rosa stood beside him. Neither of them spoke. They watched Helen lift Ellie into her arms. They watched the two of them walk toward the exit. They watched justice happen without fists or threats or violence. Just truth. Then Ellie stopped. She turned around in her grandmother's arms and looked across the lobby. Her eyes found Marcus. She did not speak. She just raised her small hand and waved. Marcus lifted his hand in return, and for the first time in a long time, something inside him felt like peace. Ellie stood at the window of her new bedroom and looked out at the rain falling over the Oregon hills. The house was small and warm. The walls were painted yellow. A quilt her grandmother had made years ago lay folded at the foot of her bed. She held the stuffed rabbit against her chest and watched the drops slide down the glass. 3 weeks had passed since she left Colorado. The first few days were hard. She did not speak much. She flinched when Helen closed a door too quickly. She woke up in the middle of the night and walked through the house to make sure someone was still there. Helen never pushed her. She never raised her voice. She simply stayed close and let Ellie move at her own pace. Every morning, she made breakfast. Pancakes with warm syrup, scrambled eggs with cheese, toast cut into triangles the way Ellie liked. She sat across the table and talked softly about the birds outside, the garden she wanted to plant in the spring, the library down the street with the big glass windows. Ellie listened. She did not always respond, but she listened. Every night, Helen read to her before bed. She chose stories about brave animals and kind strangers, and faraway places where good things happen to children who deserve them. She tucked the blanket around Ellie's shoulders and kissed her forehead. She never left the room until Ellie fell asleep. Slowly, something began to change. Ellie started talking more. She asked questions about the pictures on the wall. She pointed at the flowers in the yard and asked what they were called. One afternoon, she laughed at something the cat did in the kitchen. It was a small sound, but Helen pressed her hand to her heart and smiled. The new school was different from the one in Ridgemont. The teachers were patient. The other kids were curious but kind. Ellie sat near the back of the classroom at first. She did not raise her hand. But by the second week, she started answering questions. Her therapist was a woman named Dr. Kwan. She had a calm voice and a shelf full of stuffed animals in her office. She let Ellie draw during their sessions. She asked easy questions. She never made Ellie talk about anything she was not ready for. Some sessions were quiet, some were hard. But every week, Ellie came back. One afternoon, a package arrived at the front door. Ellie carried it inside and placed it on the kitchen table. Helen helped her open it. Inside was a stack of coloring books, a set of markers in every color, 3 picture books with shiny covers, and a brand new winter coat, thick and soft, with a hood lined in fleece. A note was tucked into the side. It was written in neat handwriting and signed by Rosa. Helen read it aloud. It said, "Every brave girl deserves to stay warm. We are thinking of you." Ellie ran her hand over the coat. She did not say anything, but she put it on and wore it for the rest of the day. A week later, a letter arrived from Marcus. It was short, just a few lines written on plain paper in careful block letters. It said, "I heard you are doing well. That makes me happy. I want you to know something. You are brave. You are strong. And you matter. Do not ever forget that." Ellie read it 3 times. Then she asked Helen for paper and a pencil. She sat at the kitchen table and wrote a reply. Her handwriting was messy and crooked. Some of the letters leaned the wrong way, but the message was clear. It said, "Thank you for not walking away." Helen mailed it the next day. Back in Ridgemont, the story had spread. Reporters showed up at the gas station. They asked Linda about the night she saw a biker crouch beside a freezing child. She told them the truth. She said she almost called the cops on him. She said she wished she had called them on the father instead. The Iron Wolves did not give interviews. They did not ask for credit. But the town began to see them differently. People nodded when they passed. Store owners waved. A woman at the diner paid for Dutch's coffee and said, "Thank you for what you did." They did not do it for respect, but they accepted it. One evening, Marcus sat in the clubhouse cleaning his bike when his phone buzzed. Rosa's name lit up the screen. He answered. She said, "I just got a call from the elementary school in Ridgemont. They want us to come speak to the kids and the parents about child safety, about noticing the signs, about making sure no child is ever invisible again." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Rosa said, "They want to make sure what happened to Ellie never happens to another kid in this town." Marcus looked at the letter on the table beside him. Ellie's crooked handwriting. Her simple words. He said, "Tell them we will be there." Marcus stood at the front of the gymnasium and looked out at the rows of folding chairs. Parents sat beside their children. Teachers lined the walls. The principal stood near the door with her arms crossed, watching. The room was quiet. Rosa stood to his left. Dutch sat in a chair near the stage, his gray hair combed back, his hands resting on his knees. Cole and 3 other members of the Iron Wolves filled the front row, their leather vests visible beneath their jackets. They were not there to talk about motorcycles. Rosa stepped forward first. She spoke clearly, her voice warm but steady. She told the children that sometimes people need help but cannot say the words out loud. She explained that there are other ways to ask: hand signs, eye contact, a look that says something is wrong. She showed them a simple signal. 2 fingers tapped against the palm, a quiet way to say, "I need help." She told them it was okay to use it. It was okay to tell a trusted adult if something felt wrong. It was okay to speak up, even if they were scared. The children listened. Some of them practiced the signal under their seats. A few parents leaned forward and watched closely. Then Marcus stepped to the microphone. He did not speak loudly. He did not try to sound important. He just told them the truth. He said, "A few months ago, I stopped at a gas station on a cold night. I was tired. I just wanted coffee and a warm place to stand for a minute. But when I got off my bike, I saw something." He paused. He said, "I saw a little girl. She was behind the building near the dumpster. She was wearing a thin coat. Her shoes were wet. She was eating food she had pulled from the trash." The room was silent. He said, "I almost walked away. I knew what people would think if they saw a man like me near a child. I knew the risks. I knew it would be easier to pretend I did not see her." He looked at the children in the front row. He said, "But I could not do it. Something in her eyes would not let me walk away." A woman in the third row pulled her daughter closer. A teacher near the wall glanced at a quiet boy sitting alone at the end of a bench. Marcus said, "I'm not telling you this because I am a hero. I'm telling you this because anyone can be the one who notices. Anyone can be the one who stops." He looked at the parents now. He said, "Sometimes the people who look the scariest are the ones who care the most. And sometimes the people who look the safest are the ones who do the most harm." He let the words settle. He said, "Do not judge by what you see on the outside. Look closer, ask questions, and never assume someone else will help, because sometimes no one else is watching." The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then the principal began to clap. Others joined. The sound filled the gymnasium, steady and warm. After the event, parents stopped to shake hands with the club members. Teachers asked for copies of the safety signals. A mother told Rosa that her daughter had mentioned a friend who seemed sad all the time. She said she was going to make a call. The signal was spreading. Marcus stood near the exit and watched the room empty. Dutch walked over and stood beside him. He did not say anything. He just nodded once. That was enough. Months passed. One afternoon, Marcus returned to the clubhouse after a long ride. Rosa was sitting at the bar with an envelope in her hand. She held it out to him. He opened it. Inside was a photograph. A little girl stood in a garden filled with flowers. She was smiling. Her hair was longer now, tied back with a ribbon. She wore a yellow dress and held a stuffed rabbit in her arms. This one had both ears. Marcus turned the photo over. On the back, in crooked handwriting, was a single word: safe. He stood there for a long time, looking at the picture. He did not speak. He did not need to. Rosa said quietly, "You gave her that." Marcus shook his head. He said, "I just stopped. That is all." Rosa looked at him. She said, "Sometimes that is everything." Marcus slipped the photo into his wallet, right next to the drawing his daughter made all those years ago. He pressed his hand against his chest for a moment. Then he walked outside, climbed onto his bike, and rode into the fading light. Somewhere out there, right now, a child is waiting for someone to notice. The person who sees them might not look like a hero. They might wear leather. They might ride loud. They might be the last person anyone would expect. But they might also be the only one who stops.